Well, welcome back to the Coaching Corral. Today we have in the corral Coach Melody. Coach Melody, welcome back.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
And Coach Greg. Coach Greg, watch your step. Good to have you back.
Glad to be back.
You know, it is a corral. There are some Clydesdales roaming around, so you got to be a little bit careful. Well, we've gotten such good feedback on this Coaching Corral kind of mini. It's not really a mini series. It's just bonus content for the Big Ass Runner herd, and so I've gotten such great feedback. Today, we're going to talk about, this is actually submitted by some of our listeners, and it's this idea of, okay, I know I need to run in my training. I think I need to strength train in my training. I like to cross train in my training. How do I balance all of those? And so, Coach Melody, how are you thinking about that with your athletes? Does it depend on what your athlete likes to do?
I am so excited for this topic. I think this is a fun topic. It depends on what the athlete's priorities are and what their goals are. So when it comes to balancing running with cross training and strength training, the trick is to look at the overall load. One of the biggest mistakes that I see people make is they're a runner and they're like, oh, I need to start strength training. And they just add an hour of strength training every other day, 3 to 4 days a week. And all of a sudden that's 3 or 4 hours of strength training added on in 1 week. And that's just too much for your body to handle, right? So if you want to add strength training, the trick is to add just a little bit at a time. I always recommend 3 to 4, 15 to 20 minute easy body weight sessions a week and grow from there. Or what you do is you need to cut back on your running a little bit and make room for the strength training. Another rule that I have is you only progress in one area at a time. And so this kind of depends on where you're at in your training cycle. Most of the time, during the off season or in the winters when we'll bring back the mileage and do more strength training. And what I mean by progressing one area at a time is you want to progress a little bit at a time, right? So you're either going to increase your mileage, increase the intensity, or increase your weightlifting. You're not going to increase your mileage and weightlifting all in 1 week. You're going to do it one at a time. And this can get kind of tricky. This is where I'd say get a coach who can help you manage that load. And then, so that's as far as strength training goes. Now, when it comes to cross training, we're all athletes. We like to move, and there's so many different ways to move. I have a few clients who they like to do a lot. I have one client who does hockey. I have another client who's also training for some mountain bike races. I personally love karate and kickboxing and wouldn't want to stop that. I would talk to the athlete, like I said, figure out what their priorities are, figure out what their goals are, and figure out how to incorporate some of those other fun things into their training.
Yeah, and I want to ask a follow-up because I think all three of us on this call enjoy cross training, enjoy strength training, do different things, be it Peloton or BMX or the black belt, karate and all that. So I guess a question I have, I'll go back to you, Melody, and then we'll go to Greg. Is there a minimum amount of running? Because I think sometimes you can look at the plan and go, or if someone doesn't have a coach that's pointing this out to them, I'm not doing any running and I'm training for a race. I'm training for running. And you hear the Jim Walmsleys of the world that kind of spoil it. I think for a lot of people, all he does is run and does these incredible numbers of miles. But you got to remember, he's elite. His DNA is different than most of ours. How do you coach your athletes to say, here's kind of a minimum threshold in terms of the amount of running we need to do?
Well, you want to make sure that you're getting enough recovery. And if your priority and your goal is to run this race, then we are going to have to cut back on some of these other things that we like to do and know that it's not forever. It's just during this training period. Then once we get to the winter and the off season, then you can do your Zumba and your swim and your things more like you like to do. For most of my athletes with things like this, we usually will cut it back to once or twice a week. But if you're training for a race, you have to run. A lot of these questions are hard because it's it depends. It just depends on how long you've been training, what your race is, what your previous race experience is like. But yes, if you are in a race training cycle, you're going to have to cut back on some of that stuff.
Yeah, the closer you get to the race too, I think the more specific you want to be. And if you're going to be running a race, to be specific, you need to be running as well. And Coach Greg, one of the things you told me early on is the better the athlete, the better the runner. I know you're a big believer in fitness and being a good athlete. How are you coaching your athletes relative to strength training, cross training, and what's enough and what's too much?
I'm a big fan of cross training. Majority of my athletes are older masters athletes. Let's face it, running is super fun and it's really hard on the body. I'd love to be able to run 7 days a week. I can't because I would just crumple in the dust. I use the bike. That's my preferred way to cross train. I have a spin bike, I have a gravel bike, I have a mountain bike, I have a road bike. So it allows me to do low impact cardio aerobic building. So it's still building my aerobic base, but I'm doing it in a lower stress way, unless I crash, and that's happened before. But
the high stress.
Yeah. Ideally, whatever cross training you're doing, it's something that's not stressing your body the same way running is. So it's a good way to add on additional volume, especially if you're a newer runner. And it's funny, Jeff, you mentioned Jim Walmsley. I think it was his second time training to win Western States. He had a pretty bad IT band injury, and he was riding indoor spin bike. He was having to supplement a lot of the volume that he would do running, and he was on the bike still. I think Wahoo, they're still sponsoring him. I don't know how much he's riding anymore, but he had to do quite a bit of bike volume just to stay healthy. And I think he still ended up breaking that Western States record. So it worked out pretty well for him. So not only for newer runners, those that are coming off of injury where you can't run the volume that you wanted, so you can supplement some of that training on something that is low impact. It gives you another option to continue to become a better athlete and continue to improve your endurance, but minimize some of the risk and minimize some of the impact and the stress on your body.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I want to stay with you, Coach Greg, because I think sometimes you get athletes that are fairly new to running. And what you were good about with me was I loved the Peloton. You knew that, so you worked that into my plan. I pickleball. You're like you're good. Yeah. You can do it on these days.
Right.
But sometimes you get newer runners that don't have any other things that they do. And so I'm curious to know if you got someone brand new. You're like, I'm not going to program running the whole time, but what are some of the other things that you would work with them on? Would you kind of dive into what are their interests, or maybe it's just someone coming to the table with no other interests? How do you work with them?
Just move. You can walk. You can walk fast. That's a good way to still have time on your feet. Obviously, you're not going to get your heart rate up nearly as high. It depends on how if you have access to a steep mountain, you can still stay in a zone 2 endurance building zone, just hiking up a steep climb. Ideally, just whatever you enjoy to do, you can do that on your off days, as long as it's not taking away from your running. I think you mentioned maybe some of the melodies like karate, maybe doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu before your long run is probably not a good idea. There's some joint manipulations that's probably not ideal to going into running, and even like playing basketball. I love playing basketball. My Achilles would snap into if I tried to jump right now. There are definitely cross training activities that you probably would not want to do on a quote easy day. But there's several low impact. If you like to swim, obviously there's no weight bearing in there. It's a good way to flush some of the soreness that you'd have out on the run. Obviously bike. I love stair climber, because the stair climber, you can get your heart rate up pretty fast. Even on my non-run days, I will do a steep incline hike, but that's also specific training for mountain ultras that I'm doing. There's lots of ways to get creative. We're trying to be runners first. Just don't do any activities that are going to possibly compromise the run the next day.
That's a good word. And Coach Melly, I know you're very passionate about strength training. Are there certain strength training areas where you really like your athletes to focus on, be it accessory work or core work? Or there's some certain things that you really, I'm pretty much going to program these kinds of things for every athlete?
For sure. So the main things that I have my athletes do when we get into strength training, it's really important that your glutes and your core are strong, and it's important that you know how to activate them and use them together. So I do a lot of like bridges and deadlifts are really, really good. I also always throw in single leg work, because running is basically you're just jumping from one leg to the other the entire time, right? So lots of single leg work, lots of hip work and lateral movement, since running is all in this frontal plane. We want to go side to side. So lateral lunges. One of my favorite exercises in the world, I add this for everybody, is 3-way hip. I don't know if you're familiar with that exercise. A 3-way hip is so good, just for stabilizing your hips and working on your single leg balance. Yeah. Oh, and then plyometrics. Plyometrics are really important just for hanging on to your bounce and working on your speed and your power. I've noticed, especially with distance runners, is they tend to lose, I call it their bounce. They get really, really flat. And I know that you guys know what I'm talking about. So adding plyometrics just to keep your bounce, keep your muscles and joints alive and bouncy, I think is really important.
That resonates a little bit too much with me, Coach Melody. I played basketball in high school, and my coach said I had a credit card vertical. He could barely slide a credit card when I would jump. And this morning I did an Orange Theory, and they had us doing jumps and stuff. I'm like, I've not gotten any better. It hasn't gotten any better. Couldn't have gotten any worse, which I guess is fortunate. But I want to stay with you, Coach Melly, because I know you're a big believer too in body weight exercises. So what are some of the body weight things in terms of strength? Because sometimes people think, oh, I got to do strength training. I don't have any weights. I don't want to go join a gym. I don't belong to Orange Theory, whatever. What are some of the body weight things that you would program?
Yeah, honestly, it really does not have to be complicated. And I think the most basic exercises are the most important and the most effective. So push-ups, I think working your upper body as a runner is incredibly important. I feel like we forget how important our upper body is for our posture. Most people, if you've run a marathon, you remember how you felt after your marathon. Your shoulders and your arms felt like terrible. And you're like, what the heck? Like, why do my arms hurt? You use your arms and your upper body a lot when you run. So push-ups, planks, deadlifts. You can do deadlifts without weight, even just the movement of doing a deadlift. Squats are good. Hill raises, super, super good. When it comes to core work, I'm a big fan of more like isometric, targeting like the deep transverse abdominis instead of your top core muscles. So sit-ups aren't bad, but you're not targeting your deep core muscles. So doing things like planks. Honestly, every runner should do planks. Dead bugs are really good because on top of targeting your deep core muscles, you're also getting the like reciprocal arm and leg movements like when you're running. So that's what I'd say. Even if those are the only body weight exercises you did, just spend 10 or 15 minutes doing that after a run. It's going to make a huge difference for you.
We had Kelly Monica on the show. Actually, I think she did a video too for our YouTube channel. And I said, what are the 3 core exercises every runner should do? And it was plank, dead bug, and I think maybe bird dogs. And so you hit on 2 out of the 3 of them. That's awesome. Well, Coach Greg, I know you're also working with your athletes relative to some body weight stuff and some other strength training. What are some of the things that you're thinking about?
So obviously strength training is a big depends as well. Depends on what experience you have. If you're comfortable in the gym lifting heavy weight, I'm a big fan because it's apart from just the durability issue, it's going to help your performance. So it can start something as easy as, like Melody said, right after your run, you do 10 to 15 minutes of just basic, you do a lower body, squat, lunge, hinge, then you do a push. It can be push-ups, or you could do a chest press if you have weights, shoulder press, and then a pull, like a curl or a row or pull down if you have a cable of some sort. And then one of those 3 core movements, and that is enough. If you do that 2 or 3 times a week after your runs, that's a great way to keep yourself healthy. Now, if you're more comfortable in the gym and you're comfortable lifting heavy, it's hard as a coach, and I'm not a personal trainer either. It's hard to prescribe, go deadlift 200 pounds if there's no one watching you, right? If you're doing that and you are, say, doing a more of a typical marathon training cycle where you have really hard like tempo runs and intervals, I would recommend doing your heavy weights on those days. So if you're running a tempo run on Tuesday, you do your heavy weight, in the afternoon. You run intervals on Thursday, you do your heavy weight Thursday afternoon. That way your 2 hard days, Tuesday and Thursday, are really hard, and then the other days are your easy run days, and your non-heavy. You can do I want to say PT style strength and mobility. You definitely have to structure your strength training differently depending on what your run schedule looks like. Now, on the other side, ultra running, which I like to say marathoning isn't is a science. There's a lot of history and a lot of good coaching around it. And ultra running, especially in the higher distances, is a bit of an art. For ultra runners, I think we can be a little bit more flexible. Typically you have athletes trying to do the back-to-back long runs. That's very normal in ultra running training, but some athletes might not be able to get away on a Saturday and Sunday. And I have one, she's now training for her first 50 miler. We have her in the gym on Saturday lifting heavy, and then she goes into her long run on very fatigued legs. So it's purposeful. Purpose of those back-to-back runs is learning how to run on fatigued legs. So we're purposely trashing her legs, and then she goes into that long run compromised. So she's learning it that way. So there's a way to structure it, knowing that, the run's not going to go great. If you're going to do a 20-mile long run with 10 miles at marathon pace, you wouldn't do a heavy leg day before, because there's no way you're going to hold those paces. So it depends. It depends on what the goals of your training are and what you are training towards. You would definitely structure your strength training differently in the week around your key runs.
Yeah, I think there's athletes like Nick Bear has made this idea of hybrid athletes, more acceptable. I think traditional history always said, well, the heavier you are, the more muscle you have, the more you've got to carry around when you're running. So I think, these hybrid athletes have helped kind of change the narrative a little bit around build, strength and muscle and things like that. But there is one key. And if someone didn't catch the episode, I think it was 2 episodes ago, I want to go to Coach Melody. Coach Melody, should you strength train on a recovery day?
No, 100. No, that's it. The answer is just no. You want your hard days to be hard, your easy days to be easy. Just to reiterate what Coach Greg said, is when you have a hard run day or a speed work day, that's when you want to do your weights. And on your recovery days, just take it easy. That's when you want to do yoga and stretch, but do not strength train on recovery days.
Yep, I teed that one up for you. I knew you were passionate about that, and the quote is so good too. So we're going to make that bumper sticker someday. Well, let's wrap it up. This has been a great topic, and I think one that athletes going to struggle with. They know they probably need to do some. They don't know how much. Are there some percentage, if someone's listening, going, okay, how much running should I do relative to strength training, cross training, and recovery? Are there some ratios that you guys work with, or does it kind of depend on the athlete? And we'll start with you, Coach Melody.
It really depends on the athlete. And I know people hate the answer. I wish that there was a really solid ratio, but it depends on the athlete. It depends on what your priorities are. It depends on what your goals are. It depends on your prior experience. So I'm just going to say again, if you've never worked with a coach before and you're really struggling with this, I feel like this is when you want to get a coach, is to help figure out this balance, because it can get really tricky.
Totally agree. Coach Greg?
Yeah, I don't have anything different to say from Melody. It really depends on the athlete and what they're training for. And it's probably no ideal ratio, right? But if you just want to start with those 2 to 3 days and just start with body weight, everyone, no matter what level, could benefit from body weight training to work on their durability, shore up any weaknesses. Almost all runners, from the beginners to experienced, are weak in the hips, weak in the glutes, unless they've specifically been doing the strength training that we've talked about. So, and a lot of the injuries, even down to the plantar fasciitis, come from weak hips and weak glutes. So I think everyone can start there.
Great advice from you both. Coach Greg, if someone wanted to contact you, what's the best way for them to do that?
On Instagram at Ultra Ninja Runner.
Coach Melody?
Best way to find me is also on Instagram, and my handle is at the Pine Tree Runner.
Awesome. And you can reach me at Jeff Harrell Yo on Instagram, and Big Ass Runner, little underlines. I don't know what those things are called. You'll find me. Just don't stop. I always tell people, if you're going to search for Big Ass Runner on Instagram, don't stop at Big Ass, because you'll get some stuff you do not want to see. Keep typing. You'll find us. This has been awesome. So appreciate both of you and your expertise, and can't wait for the next one. So thanks so much for joining the Coaching Corral.
Thanks so much. See you guys next time.
Can't wait to be back. Thanks.
See you guys.